Greetings all and welcome to week 4. So we're getting towards the halfway point. So we are going to be working on our our fiction paper. So kind of at the midterm point for us, wrapping up fiction this week. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm a total nerd, and Elder Scrolls expansion started this week, so that's on all my computers right now. So let's take a look. If you hear a bunch of scratching behind me, it's my turtle. She came out of like a miniature hibernation, so she's kind of tripping out in the background, so sorry about that. And I also apologize if I sound weird. I think I'm getting a cold, so yay for that. Okay, so let's take a look at week 4. I have all the blurb up here that you guys obviously can read on your own about the paper, but I do want to reiterate that this paper should be your thinking, your words. Obviously, it's not written in first person. It is an essay, so it should be written in third person, present tense, because it is an academic essay. So this is not written like your journals have been, which your journals have been in first person because they were journal entries, where you were just kind of writing down your thinking, but you were still, supporting them with logic, critical thinking, and the stories. But this is just on a much grander scale than that. But it is in an official essay format, so it is going to be in third person present tense. And remember, when you talk about literature, you stay in present tense, so you won't be like the main character did this happened then, because it's something as weird as it seems, because I could pick up the story right now and read it. Somebody could read it tomorrow. The story still exists. So you talk about it in present tense, as weird as that may feel sometimes. Okay, so there are several pieces in here for you once you're done watching the video that you can kind of come back to, and that is going to be the fiction handout that I'm about to go over with you. The grading rubric is up here, so you can see exactly what sections there are in the paper, and sometimes that section, the grading rubric, makes it easier for people to go back to and remember what pieces are in the essay. I've had people tell me the grading rubric after this initial video is easier to go back to look at for them than the handout. To remember all the parts that are included in the paper, and this is what obviously the grading rubric is what I use to grade your paper. And then I have a student sample paper. I used to have a different sample paper up here, but last semester a student wrote a really good paper that was very robust, and she got an A on it. There are a few mistakes in it. It wasn't like a perfect paper. Nobody ever writes a perfect paper. So there are some grammar issues in it, but not enough to have knocked her out of an A. So I asked her permission to use her paper as a sample paper, and she said okay. So I've posted her paper as a sample paper, which because she wrote on Mask of the Red Death, which people normally don't write on because the point of view is so difficult to write on. Mask of the Red Death is not a story that you'll be able to use as one of the stories, which people normally don't use that one anyways. So that is out of the running because her paper is used as a sample paper. But go over her sample paper. It follows the rubric perfectly. It'll help you kind of see, oh, okay, this is what I'm looking for. Like I said, she did get an A on the paper. She only lost a few points here and there for some grammar, and that was it. So her paper is a good paper. It was just last semester, to give you an idea of what I'm looking for, okay? And this week, what you need to turn in, that you get 2 weeks to do this paper. So not this week, it's not due at the end of this week of week 4, it's due at the end of week 5. What I am asking you to do this week is turn in your thesis statement, which is 1 sentence. So I give you a little blurb about what that should look like here. And you do have a quiz, the end of the fiction quiz. It's not going to look like my in-class fiction test because I just can't do that for you guys. online, but there will be some multiple choice questions that will be inside of Blackboard for you to answer. It's not going to be worth as many points as it is for my in-class class, because they have to take it without notes, without books, without anything. So they get a lot more points out of theirs. You guys, obviously, there's no way for me to not, say no notes, no books, because you're online. So I know you're going to do what you're going to do. It will be timed. It is a forced completion quiz. So once you open it, you have to finish it. If you walk away from it, if something happens, it's done. So just know that when you open it, you cannot peruse the questions and think about it and come back to it later. That's it. So be sure that when you open it, you're ready to sit down and finish it. If that is not the case, then you will get an alternative assignment for it. So I'm not going to reopen the quiz for you. If you mess it up, if something happens, then I'll give you an alternate assignment, which will probably be some kind of a writing assignment. So be sure you're ready to take it when I give it to you. Or I'll find another set of quiz questions for you, because there's just too much cheating that's possible. I don't usually have any problems with the quiz, but just putting it out there ahead of time for you. Okay, so let's take a look at this. What did I do with the handout? Elements of Fiction handout. Okay, so this is what our handout looks like. Let me make it bigger. Sorry, I sound like a wet fish this morning. Okay, so like I said before, this is not a research paper. There is no research in it. There shouldn't be any research in it. I should hear nobody's voice but your voice. In other words, do not look up your story. If you're like, whoops, I already looked up my story, choose a different story. I don't want to hear any echoes or remnants of sparknotes.com, schmoop.com, any internet sources because you looked up your story. This should be your voice, the story's voice, and maybe the lecturer's voice coming into this, and that's it. It should be a trio of those things in there, but not something that you read offline. Okay, so you could choose one of these stories: Miss Brill, Young Goodman Brown, Hills Like White Elephants, Fall the House of Usher, right? All the stories that we read this semester, but not Mask of the Red Death, since that's a sample paper. Pick one, right? You're just going to choose one. I don't care which one. Choose the one that probably speaks to you the most, or was it the easiest for you to move through. All of these stories can be used for this paper very well. I've gotten all of them done very well for this assignment, so they work just fine. So once you choose your story, remember you're going to stay in third person. I should not see any I, me, we, us, our, you, yours. That should not be in your paper anywhere, so make sure you double check. And basically what I spent the rest of the time doing in this is telling you exactly what I want for each paragraph. Wow, my voice does sound really weird. I can hear it echoing in my own head. So paragraph 1 is like it would be in any essay. It's your introductory paragraph. This is where you're going to introduce the story name and the author, because obviously I need to know which story you picked, right? So somewhere in there you're going to say, Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe, and make sure your story name is in italics, right? Because I need to know your story name should always be in italics. Every single time you bring up the story name, put it in italics, because that's MLA. That is the MLA way. A brief, and I mean brief, 1 or 2 sentence gist of what the story was generally about. Do not retell me the story. I have read all of these stories dozens and dozens and dozens of times. Please just give me 1 sentence, 2 sentences at the most of what they're about overall. Not retelling it to me from the beginning to the end. Not this person did this and then this happened and then this happened and this happened. That's not summarizing. That's a blow-by-blow retelling. Summarizing is overall the story concerned this. Overall the story was about whatever, love or relationships or this because this happened, all right? So whatever it was about overall. Then I would like you to tell me one theme you see present in the story. Think of the journals that we have done. You will use this as your thesis. So when you go look at the assignment for the thesis, you will see how this theme becomes your thesis, because this is a little vague right here, and I realize that. You pick a theme and be able to tie this back loosely to the rest of your paper. It becomes your anchor for your paper. It's not always going to work really well. There's going to be sections in paragraphs that you're not going to be able to do that to very well, and I understand that, so don't worry about it. But for the most part, you want to keep that in mind, what that main theme was that you chose out of your story. So kind of looking back over here to this thesis and theme, once you have picked a theme, you have to turn it into a thesis. So you've all taken English 101 at this point. So what is a thesis statement? This is what a thesis statement always is. All thesis statements have two pieces to them. They have a topic and a theme, topic theme, it's one part, plus some kind of an assertion about that topic or theme, right? So you need to be able to answer the so what question. So I think I gave kind of an example here concerning Mask of the Red Death. So let's say a theme that you noticed in the story, like Mask of the Red Death, was death, which makes sense. I mean, it's right there in the title, right? Mask of the Red Death. So my question would be like, okay, what about it? What about death? That is a theme, but what about it? You have to finish the thought. So if you did want to make your thesis about the theme of death in that story, you need to add more to it, like the what about it. So how about Mask of the Red Death showcases the theme of death and the fact that no one is immune to its final embrace. So no one can escape death, right? So that's going beyond it, right? Not just death, but what? No one can escape death. Death is there for everybody. Death will get you all. So there you go. Now you have a thesis, because you have two parts. The theme of death and the assertion, or the what about it. No one can escape it. Then you have a thesis. So if it helps you, some starters could be the story Mask of the Red Death showed no one can escape death. Or the story Mask of the Red Death highlighted death and that no one can escape it. However you want to put it, I don't care. So I'm just looking for one sentence right now in this fiction thesis and theme part. So that's your starter right there. All right. So paragraph 1, introduce the story, give me the thesis statement, and to give me a brief, a couple sentences about what the story's about. Then you move on to paragraph 2. Paragraph 2 is your point of view paragraph. All right. How the author used a point of view for the story and how it affects the story being told. I gave you a bullet list, literally, of the things I expect you to cover concerning point of view. All right? How it may be different if it were told in a different point of view. Would it have made a difference, like to the overall effects of the story? Would it have ruined the point of the story? Would it have made a good change or a bad change? Would it have ruined the ending? Would it have ruined the point? How does the point of view affect or relate to the main point that you discussed in your intro? So kind of going back to this idea of Mask of the Red Death and, death comes for us all. Would a change in point of view have affected how that main point came across to the reader if it were told in a different point of view? Like if it was told in first person from Prince Prospero's point of view, would this have affected how we got that across? Paragraph 3, discuss author's use of setting. So go back to the literary uses of setting. Remember, there's a difference between types of setting, right? Natural setting, manufactured setting. That's different than literary uses of setting, right? Authors' uses of setting, literary uses of setting are different, right? That's, character building, setting atmosphere and mood, underscore and irony. There were 6 of them. So That's what I'm looking for here. You can also talk about types of setting, that's fine, but this is what I'm looking for. Author's use of setting. How did the author use setting here? What was the setting? Then you can go back. Think beyond the initial time and place. Was there a cultural or historical aspect? Maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. Not all the stories had that, so there may not have been. So don't worry about it if there was not. How does the author's use of setting tie in or affect the main point that you discussed in your intro? So this is me trying to remind you to tie this paragraph back to your thesis statement. Paragraph 4, the author's use of symbolism. Choose one or more symbols. Now, I'm going to warn you guys right here. I honestly, I wouldn't do more. I would choose one. Usually, if you can choose one good symbol in here, it will get you through this paragraph. If people, almost every time I see people choose more than one, not always. If you could choose 2 solid ones, that's usually okay. But usually when people start choosing more symbols, the more symbols they choose, the worse this paragraph turns out. And it's usually because they just get caught up in just naming symbols and forget to do all the rest of this stuff that's in the paragraph, and it becomes a very, very shallow paragraph. So the whole point to this whole paper is to show me depth, that you understand these elements of fiction and you can apply them to an actual story. I don't care if you can just skim the top. I don't want to see skim the top. I'm looking for you to dig beneath. So usually choosing one and then really digging into it is better than choosing a bunch. If you chose 2 and you dug in, that's okay, but 1 is better if you can do that. And then tie it into your thesis. Paragraph 5, discuss the author's use of tone, which is where we were getting towards the end there. The first of the sort of tone you want to talk about here, author's tone for a certain subject maybe, or the overall tone of the story. It depends on which story you chose. Maybe a certain character's tone towards the subject or the person. It just depends on how you want to pull tone out. You don't have to talk about all 3 of these. You can decide how you want to discuss tone here. Once you've decided how you want to discuss tone, then you need to decide what sort of diction trick the author used to get this tone across to the reader. Because remember, that whole thing about diction was the purpose of using those different diction tricks like connotation and abstract and concrete and general and specific. All those tricks of how to manipulate language was specifically to create different ways to get tone across. So what sort of diction tricks did the author use to create tone? And either it was the tone of the characters or the tone of the author or just the overall tone of the story. So you need to be able to tell me at least 1 or 2 diction tricks that you noticed that the author used. Like did they use a lot of connotation? If so, how? Where did you see that used? All right. So go back to that tone lecture. And then paragraph 6, you're wrapping it up. Here's your conclusion. All right. The themes you explored, the literary elements discussed. This is your conclusion paragraph. You do need to have a works cited page. Your works cited page literally is going to have one thing on it, and that's just your story that you chose. I will give you guys the actual, I will give that to you because you guys don't know where I pulled all these stories from. That I did that, so I will give that to you. I will post that. In fact, I'll post that up there later today so that you have that for next week. So you'll basically just have to copy paste it into your final version, and just make sure you put a hanging indent in there. So that's the handout. The grading rubric looks like this, right? That's not the grading rubric. Why is that up there? This is the grading rubric. Okay. So I need to fix that. This is the grading rubric. It is basically check boxes, and this should help you kind of figure out, okay, I need to make sure that I have all of these things. So you can use it yourself, I mean, just to kind of see, do I have all these things? You know, and use it as your own checkbox. Like, okay, did I have one or more symbols? Did I say if they were universal or contextual? What did I say what it is, a symbol for? What does it do for the story? So you can just kind of go through them and make sure you have all your MLA formatting, Times New Roman, last name, page number, because it is an MLA paper. So you should know how to do MLA formatting by now. If you do not, then that is a, I think I might have an MLA formatting video I could put up there. If not, it's definitely a good, I'll find a link for you guys for a YouTube video or something. Continuity and cohesion just means, did you pull it all together? Does it make sense together? Did you move through each paragraph and stick to your theme? And then, of course, grammar. You need to make sure you're grammar checking these things. If it has a lot of grammatical errors in it, I mean, that's worth like 25 points. It's a 100-point paper, which is a big chunk in this class. So you want to make sure that, you know, you have gone through and checked it. So the rubric should help you move through the paper. This was my old rubric. I mean, it's the same rubric, but it was in, there you go. It did put it in there. Okay. And the last thing that's on here was the student's paper sample. Okay. So you could basically just go along. She wrote on the elements of the Mask of the Red Death, and you could move through her paper and see how she did each one of those paragraphs in order and how she wrote about them. It'll give you a really, really good idea on how those paragraphs should look, how those elements should look. Like I said, it was an excellent paper, you know, save for a few grammatical errors, but she really nailed those elements. And then, of course, a works cited at the end. And like I said, I'm going to have to give you guys this part because you don't know where I got the paper. So I'll put those up for you. Her paper was excellent. So that's basically what we're looking at. So for this week, whoops, that did not like what I did. So for this week, I'm looking for you just to turn in your thesis and theme because I want to make sure that you're going on the right place. You can absolutely keep forging forward because all the sections, you know, you can start building all the sections. Ask me whatever questions you want. You can obviously email me anytime if you're looking for some clarification and want to move forward. And yes, somebody always asks me if you can pull some of your own information and use your own information from your own journals. Absolutely. That's why I do those journals as we go through the semester, is so that you can start building on those same ideas, because that's what those are, right? Those are the elements of fiction that we've already been working on. So you can absolutely pull information from those. They're your journals. And then the quiz will be at the bottom. I don't have it up here yet, but I'll open that pretty soon. So that's where we're at. We're just about at the midway point. By the time you turn in the fiction essay, we will be at the midway point because it'll be at the end of week 5. And we will be rolling forward with poetry next week, though. I didn't want you to only have 1 week to put the fiction paper together. That's why I'm letting it roll for 2 weeks. But we will start poetry regardless of the fact that you're still going to have your fiction paper out there. But I wanted you to have time to think about it, to have, you know, if you wanted to use like the writing center or the, you know, writing services or whatever, the tutoring services or whatever. I wanted you to be able to do that and ask questions and have time to get the answers in the meantime, which is hard to do just in a 1 7-day week period. So that's where we're at. Let me know how it goes, and let's move on and start finishing up our fiction. And I've enjoyed reading all your stuff so far. I think we got this going.